Right, so much for transparency in this new Labour government of Keir Starmer, as it seems, as in yet another scandalous example of things carrying on as if the Tories never left office. For some bizarre reason, the Tories' awful, criminally negligent, as many surmise it to be, track record in charge of the DWP is being protected by Starmer's Labour. A ruling last month by the Information Commissioner's Office that the now Labour-run Department for Work and Pensions, overseen by new Work and Pensions Minister, the terrifyingly Toryesque Liz Kendall, had ordered the DWP to release information pertaining to deaths of claimants of universal credit over the course of the last 4 years. But Labour have instead chosen to lodge an appeal against doing so. That 4-year record would be, I'm sure, a record of damnation of the Tories. So why on earth would Labour want to protect them by blocking the release of this data, unless they're planning on carrying on exactly where the Tories left off? Another example of Starmer's Labour having stood on that election slogan of change, where again, they aren't actually changing a damn thing. Not even on the matter of avoiding unnecessary deaths of benefit claimants, it would seem. Right, so why are Labour hiding the Tories' track record as far as information goes on universal credit-linked deaths over the last 4 years at the DWP? This is the opposition party now. This is what they've been doing in power at the tail end of the last 14 years that they've been in power. We know there have been substantial and systemic failings in that time at the DWP, which have led to the deaths of a large number of sick and disabled people. And Labour now want to hide that? You'd think Labour would be shouting such stats from the rooftops, wouldn't you? What political capital they could make from such damning information. Information that many people, such as myself and others who have lived in fear, frankly, of what the DWP might do to us or our families, our loved ones for years now, those we care for, long suspected passes the line of criminality. The Tory ministers ought to be facing custodial sentences over some of this. So why are Labour instead choosing to hide such information? Does this not make you complicit in what has been done to some seriously ill people in this country at the hands of the Tories? Why would you want to associate yourselves with their deceit unless, and it's the only logical conclusion I can come to, you don't plan on doing anything any differently to what the Tories did before? I mean, at one point, Labour was all about scrapping universal credit as the colossally expensive failure that it has been. The rollout of it years and years past when it was meant to be fully operational. But of course that is just one item on the very, very long list of things Labour under Keir Starmer once said they were going to do and then changed their minds over. Now it is being kept and the rollout is continuing. So is that the reason they don't want people to know the death toll? Because it's going to continue to grow as Labour consciously decide to not change anything at all? That sounds like state-sanctioned murder at this point, with all the evidence, all the years of examples of cruelty and fatality and lethality that's been meted out at the hands of the DWP, doesn't it? But do you have a better alternative explanation for Labour choosing to hide the Tories' DWP track record? All of this has come about as a result of the work of the excellent Disability News Service. Their work to get this information released and the news that their successful appeal for this information has been blocked is detailed in this excerpt from their latest article on the matter. Labour's Department for Work and Pensions, DWP, has failed its latest test on transparency after appealing against a regulator's decision that it should release vital information from secret reports into the deaths of universal credit claimants. The information will show how many internal investigations were carried out into the deaths of universal credit claimants over the last 4 years of a Conservative-run DWP. Disability News Service has been trying since last November to secure the information, which would show the number of internal process reviews, IPRs, carried out following the death of a universal credit claimant, and what recommendations for improvements were made by the civil servants who carried out those reviews. DWP has previously insisted that it intends to publish information at a future date. It has also argued that the ad hoc release of the requested information into the public domain could engender public distrust in the DWP and would only serve to increase the misconceptions and incorrect views held by the general public. Despite those arguments, the Information Commissioner ordered DWP last month to release the information. But the Information Commissioner's office confirmed to DNS this week that DWP has launched an appeal against that decision. It will now be left to the Information Rights Tribunal to decide if the information should be released, but it is likely to be many months before that hearing takes place. Sadly, this isn't even the first time since Labour came back to power that DWP data along these lines has been blocked either. At the beginning of this month, Disability News Service reported that it had applied to access information pertaining to so-called IPRs, internal process reviews, as aforementioned, that are investigations and reviews into deaths and harm caused in relation to the dreaded work capability assessment over the last 5 years. Again, the Tories' time in charge. Again, Labour blocked the release of this information too, not once, but twice. On the grounds that the first time round, because they said they had plans to publish the data themselves in due course, but the second time they changed their excuse, inexplicably, and that time declared, it was all too expensive to publish. It all functionally smacks of Labour once more hiding 14 years of the Tories' track record with the work capability assessment, but also excuses Labour to keep on using it potentially when even the Tories were talking about scrapping it near the end of their time in power. Labour, it should be noted, aren't completely squeaky clean on this particular issue here either, as it was they, in 2008, who introduced the blasted thing, another dreadful decision by Yvette Cooper, now of course the Home Secretary. It allows Labour to hide behind excuses, while still potentially committing to using these things, these mechanisms going forward, possibly even toughening them up to become even more barbaric, as Rachel Reeves hints at more social security cuts coming in her budget to throw more people in need off of the support they require, with all of the ramifications of that, which should be obvious by now, and all to avoid taxing the rich to cover economic shortfalls, which functionally only exist on paper and not in practice, when the government can create as much money as it needs to fill those gaps. All of Reeves's talk of fiscal black holes and gaps in the economic record or of books being cooked fundamentally are a sham, but a sham that the true cost of could continue to be measured in lives. And that really, it seems to me, is the only excuse that makes any sense as to why Labour won't publish data that for the most part they aren't at fault for. And now we're back to universal credit, and this is pertinent because Labour have wasted no time extending the rollout of moving people from the so-called legacy benefits, the old benefit system, onto the universal credit system, and the majority of those who have thus far not been rolled over have been left till last, largely because they are the most complex cases, those with the most complicated health issues and needs that universal credit was most ill-equipped to cope with. And that extends to the family of, yours truly at this point. Migration notices for ourselves having arrived in the last couple of weeks. We are very much now going through that process ourselves here, now along with a lot of other people too. But as such, of course, it is more important than ever that there is reassurance that the mistakes and cruelty of the Tories aren't going to be repeated by Labour now. And stalling the release of requested information, that is not going to reassure many people that this is change, that this will be done better. Rather, it sends a message that it will be business as usual, and the failure of the last 14 years of Tory rule and 16 years that the work capability assessment has existed for will continue to be compounded by a party, by a government once again demonstrating they are not the change they promised they would be. And the speed they've decided to move on with this rollout, having only been in power for 6 weeks, but it doesn't exactly fill you with confidence that they've been looking at this carefully, that they've identified areas of improvement that needs to be done, as opposed to just carrying on regardless, heedless of the damage that has already been caused and that may be caused going forwards to the lives of so many more people. Disability News Service reported just a week ago that 3 disabled people had taken their own lives and that their deaths were linked to flaws within the universal credit system. The speed this rollout under Labour is continuing, there is no way they have looked to fix anything. How can they possibly have done so? And if indeed they had, surely they would be shouting about it from the rooftops about how awful the Tory administration had been in all the ways that they'd identified. The Tories left a department in the DWP verging on collapse, and where people have been sent the migration notices telling them they must now apply for universal credit or lose their benefits. When it comes to those people, as a snapshot that DNS looked at between July 2022 and February of this year, over a third of those people never did so and therefore lost their support. What has the DWP done in that time to check on the welfare of these people and make sure they're okay? Universal credit has been a universal failure, not just in how it is administered by the DWP, but because it relies on internet access and computer literacy. Disproportionately, it will have punished all of those people with the lack of skills necessary and the lack of access to be able to claim it. A massive flaw that has never, ever been adequately addressed. Not least of all of these problems at the DWP now is just how terrifying the new Work and Pensions Minister Liz Kendall is. Her rhetoric is all about getting people into work rather than any language about supporting people who need help because of their additional needs. and completely ignoring the fact, of course, many people on benefits are already in work. The last thing people needed now was another DWP minister like all the Tory ones that had come before. But again, under Starmer's Labour, nothing changes at all. And I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.